I suggest perhaps you put it in gallery view. By now, people are Zoom professionals. I had no idea what Zoom was 3.5 months ago. Now I can't imagine life without it. It's great to see everybody. 2 people are still in the waiting room. I want to thank Lynn for being our technology person behind the TBE logo. Although I don't see the TBE logo, Lynn's there somewhere. There's the TBE logo if I look on my second page. And people should know by now, you can unmute yourself to kind of chime in. But I would suggest staying muted just in case there's interference in the background or you just want to say something of a more private nature. And then unmute yourself when you want to share a word. With a group of about 36, we're not small, we're not big, so you can jump in, but it might be easier if you raise your hand, and then I can even call on you. Is that Hannah in South Africa? Wow, that's amazing, Hannah. We have not had a South Africa contingent. Can you just unmute yourself and tell the group what you're doing in South Africa in 30 seconds or less and what time it is there?
Hi everyone, I'm Hannah. I'm here. It's 6 o'clock, not too late. I'm a member of TBE, grew up there. I graduated from university last year. I'm spending the year here in Cape Town, working at a progressive school here as their youth and music fellow. But really excited to be back with my TBE family.
So a Jewish educator in South Africa, that's awesome.
Joel, can I do a quick shout out to Hannah? I attended services with her in February, I think it was, and she was wonderful.
Oh, that's so great. Wow, what a small world this truly is. And Zoom allows us to do things that we can't typically do. So this is like a Shehechianu moment. Amy, I don't know if you're in Florida or Wellesley, but pretty extraordinary to see people around the room.
I'm in Massachusetts.
Oh, Massachusetts, great. That's still exciting. That's great. I'm glad you're out of Florida. So welcome to summer session at TB Online. Rabbi Sherman was on before. I think he's off, but I just want to thank him for all of his hard work.
I'm here.
Great. Something to do almost every day of the week that's related to TBE. Some really great learning. So I'm excited to be a part of it. I'm excited for the summer ahead, despite the strangeness of this time. This is my hope for today. We'll go for 30 to 40 minutes, however we want to explore the text, but I want to focus on one verse. So there are 6 weeks in the summer session, and then I'm going to take off 1 week. 3 weeks are going to be what I've called my favorite verse in the Torah. Now, I have lots of favorite verses, so I guess the first challenge was to reduce it to 1 or 2 or 3. And then the alternate weeks, we're going to look at a film exploring the American Jewish experience. So next week at this time, the film is called Hester Street. And so you should be able to find it on Netflix or Amazon Prime. I've got to look at this, but we'll explore Hester Street next week and explore the American Jewish experience together. So let's dig in. What is the first verse? The first verse, which you may have noticed that I've chosen, is one that is deeply influential to my rabbinate. It is from Genesis, chapter 1. Don't want to reveal it yet. I can say that in our sanctuary, we actually have biblical verses around the benches. And there was a debate. Should there be one biblical verse or many biblical verses? So raise your hand if you think there should be one that repeats. Raise your hand that you think there should be many verses that appear one time. Got it, great. In typically Jewish fashion, we chose neither. There is not one verse that appears many times. There aren't many verses that appear one time. Instead, there are about 4 verses that appear 3 times, typically Jewish compromise. I must admit that the one verse I wanted to have appear over and over again is the one near the ark. It's from where the story of Adam and Eve, where God says, "Where are you?" And the response is, "Here I am." And so I had actually advocated for that to be mantra-like around the room. And we wound up with a combination of verses. Interestingly enough, as I reflect, the 3 verses that I have chosen for our study, my favorite verses, are not on the benches of the sanctuary. So you can see how successful I was in advocating amidst a very strong-willed building committee that turned out to build an extraordinarily beautiful and meaningful building. So I thank them each day that I was in the minority. But our first verse is not, "Where are you? I am here." It's the story of creation, which is chapter 1, verse 27. And the verse is, "And God created Adam," often translated as man, but for our sake, we're going to translate it as the human being. "And God created the human being in God's own image. In the image of God, God created Adam. Male and female, God created them." It's the story of creation. And what I'd like to do, we have 44 people. Zoom doesn't easily allow kind of an organic conversation because more than one people can't speak at once. And Jews like to overlap, as I've described before. So it's a really challenging medium for the Jewish people. But this is what I found to be most successful. We're going to jump into breakout groups for only 5 minutes because I know we want to kind of explore the text all together. But I want to enable each person to share for a brief moment and to learn each other's names and get to know each other. So here's the question. Knowing that I have chosen the verse from Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, about the creation of the human being, and I've chosen it because I want to explore 3 important values that I believe are foundational to Jewish life and all come from this verse. I believe that our creation stories are foundational. So I want you to share where you were born, or how you were born, or what was it about being born, with one value that you link to that story. Now so it could be, I was born in the Bronx and I learned this value, or I was born in the back of a truck and I learned this value, or I don't know. It doesn't have to be about location, but I'm interested in about the link of the value to the story. And the challenge is I only want to do this for 5 minutes. So what we're going to do is break in groups of 5. And hopefully you'll have active participants because I know some people on Zoom like to multitask. If you have a multitasker, just be gentle and work with the 4, 4.5, or whatever you've been given. But let's break people into 5s, Lynn, and maybe share 45 minutes to a minute. And then we're going to come back in 5 minutes. And the biggest challenge is there's no warning. You just are brought back into the big room. All right, make sense? So you're going to get a cue that says join a breakout room. I ask you to click yes, and I'll see you in 5 minutes. Your birth creation story with a value. Let's do it, Lynn. The magic. when we see the image of God. Make sense? So the rabbis have to unpack this verse. So let's take a look at a passage from the Talmud, which I sent and I'm going to share with you. And you'll tell me if it appears. Can you see it?
Not
On the
yet.
share screen? Not yet. Why? Let's see. I'm going to give it one more shot. Share screen. How about now? Can you see it now? All right. That is
Just the top page of the page. Can't see the document.
okay. I think I'm going to be able to fix this. How about now?
Yes.
Great. Fantastic. So we are looking at Sota, which is a tractate in the Talmud. I'll skip the Aramaic and the Hebrew, and we'll jump down to the English, and hopefully you can see it. Just nod if you see Rabbi Chama. Can you see that? Great. Rabbi Chama, son of Rabbi Hanina, said, "What does the Torah mean when it says you shall walk in the ways of the Lord? Can a person really walk in the shadow of the divine presence? Rather, it means you should imitate the ways of God. Just as God clothes the naked, because God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothes them, so shall you clothe the naked. Just as God visited the sick, you should visit the sick. Just as God buried the dead, you should bury the dead. Just as God comforts the grieving, so you too comfort the grieving." So I share this text with you because when the rabbis explore what is God's image, they don't use physicality. What do they use instead?
Attributes.
Attributes. So if God is blank, good, human beings are good. If God is caring, human beings are caring. That is what it means to be created in the image of God, which is a really interesting notion. It doesn't mean that we're big, but it doesn't mean necessarily, it's about verbs of caring, which lends me to three core values of Judaism that I pull from this verse, and I'm going to try to share the screen again. And these are the three that I would like to focus on today. One, from this verse, we learn that we're all infinitely worthy. Two, that we're all equal. And three, that we're all unique. Now, I just realized I just jumped a step for you. Let's go back to Heschel, the third passage. I'm going to take you, I missed a step. The first step is we're created in the image of God, but God has no image. So what does that say about how we're created? Well, what God does, we're created to do. So this is what Heschel says. Why are we forbidden to make images of God? It's not because God is beyond all images, so that no image could possibly depict God. If that were the case, images would merely be harmless. God has an image, and that is you. You may not make the image of God because you're the image of God. The only medium in which you can make God's image is the medium of your entire life. And that is precisely what we're commanded to do. Everything you do, everything you say, each moment and the way you use it are all part of the way you build God's image. to take anything less than a full living human being, like canvas or a piece of marble, and call it the image of God would be to diminish God, to lessen God's image. So let's stop there. And what does this say about the human being from the creation narrative that we learn? How does Judaism perceive the human being? Marlene, I can't see everyone, but I'll call on people I can or just jump in. You have to unmute yourself, though. You are muted, Marlene. Let me see.
They offer us endless possibilities, and we have all these opportunities that when we were created, we came with the ingredients, and it's our job to mix them up into the best recipe for our life, considering that we want to follow through in the image of God.
Beautiful. The human potential is so great. Other thoughts?
We have the phrase, a life well lived. And that resonates with what was just said here about how you live your life. You know, your life is the image of God. And yesterday, some of us were studying the life of Heschel. And he is a prime example of a life well lived and someone who has lived in the image of God and is a beacon for all of us.
Yeah, to have that potential and then see it actually realized is quite extraordinary and sacred. Carol, I guess Klingon, then Mitchell. I see Carol's hand.
I think it means that you have to be always mindful in everything you do and every choice you make, that you have this standard to live up to, that you need to be godlike in your behavior and your choices and your values, and that's a very, very high standard.
Yeah. It's really hard. And I've been thinking a lot about this verse in light of the statues recently that are being taken down. Because there's another text in the Torah that says you shouldn't have graven images. And that's why there are no human figures in synagogues, unlike churches, especially Catholic churches. You know, they surround the church. They're inside the church. They're outside the church. In synagogues, you rarely see human figures. And I think it's because, and I was reminded, you know, when we put up these human figures, we think that they're going to be perfect, these heroes. And then we realize that they're not. And so we take them down because they're really failed in our eyes. And that's what we're witnessing now. If you put up a bust thinking one is godlike, ultimately, you know, you put someone up on a pedestal like that way. History uncovers some failures, some much greater than others. But I've been thinking about in Judaism, like in Israel, you won't see these memorials. These memorials are usually lacking a human figure, and they're usually creating metaphors of the verb, the action. So it's less about the one individual and about the potential, the aspiration that we desire. But just a thought as I've been watching these statues get dragged through the mud. And I just saw yesterday, my colleague, they finally were able to get the Judah Benjamin statue removed in Charlotte, North Carolina. Judah Benjamin was the highest ranking Jew in the Confederacy. And there's a big memorial for him that was placed in the 40s by his synagogue. And so the synagogue was fighting with the city because they were embarrassed to have their name on the Confederate monument. And the city was saying, you can't pull this down just because it has your name on it. And just yesterday, they were able to pull the memorial to Judah Benjamin. Interestingly enough, it was spray painted with the BLM, Black Lives Matter. And you can see the stress point around this symbol. But let's get back to the image. Yes, Marcia.
Just had a question. I have a question. If it says that what we do is part of the way we build God's image, what if we're not good people? What does that mean for God's image?
That's a great question. Let's hold that a little bit. Other thoughts? Judy.
Oh, what I was going to say is it puts a lot of the locus of control in the individual as opposed to other religions where I feel like the idea is that you don't have as much control over who you become, who you are, who you become.
Ani, did you want to say something? Maybe you're muted. I've just lost you.
I always think of the image of God breathing life into each human being. And I always feel that with that is the potential to be the very best of who we are. I think of that in the image of the importance of in Judaism of a good name. And it is about working so hard to discover the uniqueness and the qualities breathed in that we can bring forward. So as Shelley was saying, it's a life well lived and a good name.
Beautiful, beautiful. So this is aspirational. We can't be God. We are imperfect. You put us on a pedestal, it will be easy to pull a human being down. Only God is God, according to Judaism, and we are human beings. And yet, we're created in the image of God. We have this infinite potential that's quite extraordinary, which is where I really want to arrive now to our three values. One is that if you base all of creation on the notion that we are created in the image of God, I think we have three very important points that shape the Jewish worldview and ultimately humanity as a whole, I believe. One is that we're all infinitely worthy. If we are all infinitely worthy, what does that mean in terms of how we live our lives? Every person is infinitely worthy. You live your life thinking every person is infinitely worthy. Amy?
I think it affects our actions towards ourselves and toward others. Because if we value ourselves, if we look at ourselves as being worthy, then we see others too as being worthy and we treat them as such.
Yeah, beautiful. That we're in the image of God, we treat others in the same way. Every person's infinitely worthy. How does that influence the living of your life? Carol Klingen?
There's no limit on what you can do and aspire to. You don't say, well, I've done very well and that's enough. You have infinity suggests that you keep going and you keep going and you can never reach perfection and you can never reach completion of what you need to do.
The Jews have high hopes and high levels of guilt because we're always striving and always feeling a little bit, because infinity is a hard thing to arrive to. You never get to the promised land. Marcia?
Well, if we're infinitely worthy and other people are too, we can't give up on them so easily.
That's really powerful. That every person in the world, and that's why I included a famous verse, if you have saved a single life, then you've saved an entire world. If every person has infinite worth, Even the child who washes up on the shore, a refugee, infinite worth. It's incumbent that you save that human life. They're like the entire world. That's huge. Eileen?
I was just going to say, I hope you won't mind this, Joel, but it reminds me of the sermon that you gave a few years ago when you talked about when the person in the car in front of you was really annoying you, wasn't turning in, you want to beep at them or whatever, or you talked about the grocery store person and the lines that are on, and you have to see people. Everybody is equally worthy, and there's a reason why they're doing what they're doing, and truly, it's given me patience for many people over the last few years. But I think of that.
That's nice. I think living with the belief that everyone has infinite worth can be quite powerful. I think it even leads to an inclusivity that, every person who walks around might have the missing piece for you. They might have a little wisdom. There's infinite worth. There's something to get to know about them. Even people who annoy you, there might be something about them in their infinite worth that has something to teach you, for which you can grow. Definitely changes our interactions when we believe that every person has infinite worth. Number 2, in Jewish culture from this verse, I derive the value that everybody is equal. If every person has infinite worth, then no one is more and no one is less. Which is not true of a lot of societies in the world that have caste systems, where people do hold different values, have a different value. But everybody is equal. And we see that in our faith tradition through Moses, our greatest leader. We don't really know much about him. It's not like he's the child of the king. That the greatest leaders can come from the humblest places. Everybody has the same opportunity, or should have the same opportunity. Or rabbinic Judaism, which is not passed on in a hereditary way. It's a meritocracy. Everyone should be equal. Thoughts on how that would live your life, living in a religion where everybody is equal? Ronnie? You might be muted because I don't hear you. You are muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay, well, I think it's a wonderful ideal, but I wonder in the real world, and I'm actually thinking about Israel and how that works out between the Israelis and the Palestinians, how that works out in real life there.
Yep. So once again, these are aspirational and that we want to be like God, but clearly there's moral failings, I would say. But if we live life as though everyone were equal, maybe the world would look very different, I think is what you're saying, right? In Israel, it would look very different if everyone were treated equally.
Yeah, it would actually maybe look a little bit now.
Laura?
I think that this pertains a lot to what's happening with the current issues on racism with Black people who are not equal.
Yeah, it's amazing with the Bible that in Genesis 1 says everyone's equal has led to a world where we have so many distinctions and so much inequality. Marcia, you wanted to say something?
I really like that you brought up Moses, because I had never thought of this before, that he was both the child of slaves and the child of princess, and he was both a Hebrew and the son-in-law of a Midianite priest, that he really did embody for us somebody who brought everyone in. I never had even thought of that with Moses before.
Yeah. Moses, we know glimpses too, but this hodgepodge. Other thoughts, David?
I think it's very powerful and maybe even different from other religions that Jews don't feel salvation is only for them, and they're at least Reformed Jews. And, no nationality, no group, no ethnicity, and also no religion gives anyone any more potential or ability to be good or saved or whatever.
Yep. So in Judaism, all peoples of the earth can achieve salvation by pursuing their own path. They don't have to be Jewish to be saved, unlike other religions where being saved in the afterlife demands adherence to their own religion. In Judaism, a Christian gets salvation, a Muslim gets salvation. And so there's an equality in that sense. Let's move to the third one. So from this one verse, we get human beings are infinitely worthy, human beings are all equal, and finally, human beings are all unique. I say that because God, even though is all, is one. So the rabbis say, if God is one and God is unique, there's nothing like God. The human being created like God is also unique. So there are a lot of stories in the Midrash of, how does God create everyone unique, which is pretty amazing. I think it's still true. Like, as much as we know about retinal scans and fingerprints, still billions of people still are unique. It's pretty amazing. I guess cloning is the only thing, but that's a human, right? Do you get the same fingerprints through human cloning? I assume so. But so they would tell the story that the Roman emperor would make coins by imprinting and just throw out coins, and they're all the same. But when God stamps God's image, because the Roman emperor would always stamp his own image on every coin, God stamps every coin with God, but everyone's unique. That's what makes God's creation so incredible and unlike any other ruler. So billions of people have infinite worth. They're all equal, but they're all unique. So now if we hold that together, how does that shape how we lead our lives? Marlene? You have to unmute as well.
Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. I mean, this is the basis of it. If everyone is in the image of God, and so part of us is in every other person.
So you don't hurt someone because you'd be hurting God.
And you'd be hurting yourself.
And you're hurting yourself. Yeah. Nice. Other thoughts? What does it mean to live in a world where everybody's unique? It's pretty incredible. Billions of people on this earth. And everyone. Carol Mitchell.
I think it really speaks to respecting each other, realizing that because everybody is unique and not identical to us, even though we probably share 99% or 99.9% of our DNA, that there's a premium on respecting each other and honoring each other. And if I could share a quick story, when my grandson was 4 years old, he told me that he knew what God looked like and he could draw me a picture. And he did without my saying anything. And God had 14 arms and 14 legs, 7 on each side. And to me, that's the book of creation, the 7 days of creation. So I think in that sense, everyone is unique because in creation, nothing is exactly the same.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary to think of these. Everyone's equal, everyone's the same, everyone's different, everyone's unique. Let's keep going. Anyone else? Helene.
It also tells us that even people who don't necessarily look like us or act like us are equally in God's image and equally worthy and equal. So it really is a blow against xenophobia.
Yeah, I want to even add to that. Not only is the stranger or someone different than you in the image of God, but someone that you think is the same as you is not the same. They're actually different. So how does that shape how you interact with people? And that if you can explore that person's differences, you're getting to know the godliness. So if you think you're hanging out with people because you're like them, you're missing the uniqueness of the godliness. You want to make sure you surround yourself with people who you know are different. And if you haven't met their difference, there's more to dig. Final thoughts before we go? So, if not, still getting used to Zoom, but it's good to see all of you and to hear some of your voices. We looked at one verse today. God created the human being in God's image. Does God have an image? No. But it does mean that God possesses certain attributes that the human being strives towards throughout life. Caring, loving, empathy. And then as we meet other human beings created in the image of God, we can demonstrate those values by realizing everyone has infinite worth. Take care of every person. And if you can save one, you save a world. Number two, everyone's equal, but three, everyone's unique. Meaning, don't think you're more important than anyone else. At the same time, get to know the uniqueness of the other. So when you walk around, treat everyone really well, knowing that they're an important part of God's creation and can impact you. They can lead to your growth. Every person that is on this screen can bring us closer to God's image. They're created in God's image, and they may possess the missing piece for all of us as well. And I think if we can all do that, there'll be a lot of shalom, a lot more peace in the world. So this is a verse that has always touched me. It has always also influenced my rabbinate in that I love welcoming new members. Not because I think it's another person or the synagogue's getting too big, but because they have a piece of God within them, and I want to get to uncover that. Every person lends beauty to the world. And so when someone new enters the door, the first thing I'm thinking of is divinity, just walk through. Let's begin to get to know that person. And my goal is that we get to know each other and learn about each other's uniqueness, and then recognize that uniqueness for the beauty that God intended it to be in the act of creation. So with that, I hope you have a great week. I hope I see you for Hester Street next week. And I just want to say goodbye on Zoom. And if you have any questions, let's keep the chat going through email. And I have everyone's emails, and I can share more thoughts. All right, everybody, have a great day. Stay healthy.
Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow, I hope, on Zoom.
Thank you.